together once in a 4 weeks, once in a 3 weeks, we'll find a rhythm. But take this 30 minutes session for an inspiration fix, what sometimes can take us into a transformative path in our lives. If not, at least have an inspiration which we can go back home with, and continue our grinds which we do here. So today we have a very exciting talk from Akshaya. Akshaya heads legal for some of you guys who are new to the company, and with such a small team, and most of the teams are sitting here. Three of the musketeers are already here. Such a small team, and she's able to lead this team and also create a huge impact as Freshtalks goes ahead. And I can vouch for it because I know what sort of terms we battled out. But not just this, they are working with the accounts teams to service agreements, so much, and it's amazing. So what today Akshaya is going to reveal us is the secret of her cognitive abilities as well as the technical legal abilities. And I'm just going to leave you with a teaser that who would have known that the answer perhaps lies in Sanskrit. Not in totality, but here's it. Akshaya.
We are all at work and you must be wondering, why are we doing a talk on learning a new language? No one here is after scoring marks or traveling abroad for education or work. If the teaser that we sent out as the mail, as part of the invite, gave an idea about it. When you're speaking in just one language or when you're conversing in just one primary language, you not only lose on other types, on other words, but you also lose on other types of words. You're just restricted by the rules and syntax and vocabulary of just one language. An example is, you can see on the slide here. Most of us here would be familiar with the term Ubuntu. It's a South African dialect, which means the belief that we are defined by our compassion and kindness towards others. This word cannot really be explained in English, and many times we are faced with a dilemma while speaking English. We want to say something, but we don't have the exact word for it. We are struggling to get the exact word for it. And even in our day-to-day conversation, what we use is not just English. We use many French words, déjà vu, vis-a-vis, or we use even German words, Poltergeist, Schadenfreude, kindergarten. So just one language really restricts your ability to converse and convey emotions. But that's not it. The benefits extend beyond this. Studies have proven that learning new language actually contributes to your cognitive abilities. When you speak in your native tongue or your first language at home, and in school or college or work, you're speaking in a different language, what you essentially have to do is switch between two environments. Your native language might have some structures and rules that are not the same as the language that you use in your profession. Most of us here, our native or first language, native language would not be English, but we all speak English in office or in school. And there is a subconscious switch that we have to do, which means we have to forget certain things that Tamil or Hindi or Kannada provides, and instead to switch to the rules of English. This is called inhibitory control. Now, the part of your brain that is responsible for the switch and that activates the switch is also the part of the brain that helps with scoring on standardized tests, maths, vocabulary, language. So studies actually found that bilinguals or multilinguals tend to do better in standardized tests, in probably JEE or some other standardized tests. It's not just that. When you speak more than one language or when you're learning one language, you become more perceptive. And you develop the ability to pick out only relevant information, and you could weed out information that is not really required in your context. This is something that multilinguals or bilinguals have a better ability to do. We all would know Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, detectives who have to uh, weed out non-relevant information and pick out relevant information for, say, solving problems or solving cases. They were all skilled polyglots. So when you speak more than one language, it gives you the ability to do so. And there is something, it's not just this, and there's something about, say, reading Odyssey in its original language, Greek, or reading Abhijnana Shakuntalam in Sanskrit. Translation loses out a lot of context and you don't get the real flavor out of it. It doesn't stop there. So, other studies have shown that you tend to make less emotional responses when you are posed questions or problems in a non-familiar language. It doesn't mean that you don't understand that language, but it's not your first language. So when you are given a problem or a riddle, or you have to make a decision and things are explained in your non-native language, you tend to be a little emotionally apart from it and you tend to make better decisions. Your decision-making ability actually improves. That's another positive, another benefit of having access to different languages, learning different languages, and being multilingual. Most importantly, learning a language is actually the best exercise for your brain. You have to learn new structures, you have to learn new vocabulary, you have to learn new grammar, and this tremendously exercises your brain. And this is very useful in keeping off cognitive decline and cognitive decline or Alzheimer's or dementia or senility. It actually keeps that at bay in the future. So learning a language, even in adulthood, not just in childhood, even learning it in adulthood, actually helps keep dementia and Alzheimer's at bay. And quite a few studies have actually proven it. And this is one of the most important reasons or the trigger for me to start learning a language. When I was in the earlier firm, a study had come out that was very specific to lawyers and advocates. So the study showed that successful lawyers and eminent lawyers were afflicted with a few malices. I wouldn't say malices, with a few conditions. They tend to be alcoholics. They tend to face depression. And more than that, a third problem was emerging. They were seeing more and more lawyers being afflicted with dementia late in their careers. And they were talking about lawyers who had photographic memory. I mean, by definition, our profession, you need to remember, assimilate, and apply a lot of things. And somehow they noticed that people who have been extremely successful later stage in their life actually faced cognitive decline. It could be senility or dementia or Alzheimer's. And when we were discussing this in our firm, we thought, okay, there might be some truth to it. One of the most eminent jurists in India, called Nani Palkhiwala, some of you all might have heard of him. Extremely brilliant lawyer, photographic memory. He could quote page numbers of judgments in the cases. He had such a memory, but in the end, he had dementia. And this was also the case with some US judges. So it got me thinking, and I thought, why wait till 60 till I find out whether I'm one of those or not? So I thought, okay, why don't we just address the problem and why don't we see what can be done? And when I researched on what is the best way to actually stave off dementia, learning a language was on top of the list. So although I like learning languages, I had learned languages, this sort of became a trigger for me to go ahead and actually do it. So the next question was, what language should I learn? I had grown up, my mother tongue is Tamil, but I had grown up in Maharashtra, so learned Hindi and Marathi as languages. I'd learned German. German was the one option, but I was just too lazy to drive to Nungambakkam to learn that. Persian, I started learning Persian, but I couldn't keep up with the script reorienting your style of writing was a little difficult for me, so I never kept with it. And this thought was just with me. I knew I wanted to learn something, I was not really sure what I should be learning. So, every day on my way home from work, I used to pass this place. My law firm was on Cathedral Road and I live in Alyar. So, every day I had to pass through Roypeta High Road and go through Luz. And every day I would pass this college, the Madras Sanskrit College. And this was, for 2 years I had been passing this, but never really gave any thought to it. So when the time came when I thought I should actually start learning something, I said, okay, why not Sanskrit? Let me just try it out. It's closer to office, it's closer to home, it's very accessible. So I thought, okay, let's go and learn Sanskrit. And of course, I had read a lot about uh, how challenging it is to learn and how difficult it is to master and all of that. I thought it would be an intellectual challenge and it would also work my brain. So that's how I went and enrolled into a course here, and that was 3 years ago. So it just started off as simply an exercise of learning new language, but as I started learning it, it opened a lot of doors and it widened my horizons in ways that I had not really foreseen. A lot of you here would have heard about the clear structure and syntax of the language. So what does it really mean? Why is it a simple, at the same time a difficult language to learn? Basically, the entire vocabulary of the language is condensed into something called dhatus or stem words. And these are just 2000, roughly around 2000 in number. And the entire language has evolved just from these basic 2000 words. So how do you do that? You add something before a stem, you add something after a dhatu, you combine words, you make compound sentences. There are many ways to do it, whereby you can take one word and come up with many forms of it. An example here, a very common stem is the gum, gach, or to go. That's where go, gati, pragati, everything comes from that root. So when I say gachati, means to go, I just add one letter before that. If I say agachati, it means to come. If I add another prefix, anugachati is to follow. If I add avagachati is to understand. Or upagamanam, if I add upa, it means to come near. So there are many of these prefixes that you can add to create new words, and some of the examples over here. So all these words actually come from that one root or dhatu called gam. And some of the words are what we use common over here, pragati, nirgat, nigaman, and all of that. Similarly, you could add certain words after the stem root to create new words. So, kru or karna, karta, it all comes from the stem kru. So you add a suffix and you get the noun, the doer. You add something called a lyut pratyaya and you get karanam, which is doing. You add nyat pratyaya and the result is work. And if you add something called tavyat, which denotes something that must be done, and you get the word kartavya. So this is how you form words in Sanskrit, and there are rules prescribed as to how you should do it and when you should do it. And these are the rules that are the challenging part of the language. There is no other way other than to remember and learn these rules. Anyone here who's learned Sanskrit in school? School, college, anytime. So you'd all be familiar with conjugation and declension. This must be one of the first things you would have learned. And this is just one of the words. Every word, every noun in the language has 8 cases and 3 numbers. So basically for one word you could have 24 forms. And this is just one word. For every word that you use, you need to remember all these forms. And it's not any easier with verbs. There are 10 tenses, 3 persons and 3 numbers. So you have your first person, second person, third person, and you have singular, dual, plural, and you have 10 tenses. And there's no other way but to remember all of this. And it's not difficult, it's just like remembering tables. It's very difficult in the beginning, but when you get into the rhythm of it, you just remember, you instinctively know how it comes. This is where the exercise part of your brain comes. Because you have to remember all these rules and lists and sequences, and not just that, you should be able to recall it, apply it, and solve it in sentences in real time. That's where the exercise of your brain happens. And I could really see it helping me in different ways. I could see my concentration improving, I could see my thoughts becoming more organized, and I could see I was not getting overwhelmed with daunting tasks. In the beginning, when we were told that we have to remember some 50 verbs in all these 10 tenses and three numbers and uh, three persons, we were like, how is that even possible? It just can't be done. But when you actually start doing it, you realize it's not that difficult. Everything is possible. So I realized that it was actually helping me subconsciously to not get daunted or not get overwhelmed with complex tasks. Okay. Grammar is just one part of the language. Language also has literature, prose, poetry. Through the medium of language, you also learn a lot about the culture that it speaks of or what is written in that language. Uh, any fans of Downton Abbey over here? Not many. Okay. uh, this is quite a popular sitcom, not just in England, although it's based in England. It's not popular just in England, but all around the world. So when the crew was interviewed and the maker was interviewed as to why do you think it was such a big success, he said entire English speaking world somewhere relates to what is over here. We all grew up reading Dickens or Jane Austen, and we all have this vision of Victorian England and what is described in those books, or Enid Blyton. So when we actually saw something being depicted in that, we all could relate to it in some way or the other. So he said there's a little bit of England in all of us, especially this England, and that's why the show became such a big hit. So what I'm trying to say is that a language is also a gateway to the culture that it denotes. And it's not just with English. You learn about ancient Greece through Iliad or Odyssey. And you can see this in the Sanskrit drama, literature, and poetry also. Uh, there is a poem by the famous poet Kalidasa called Meghaduta, which actually describes the entire geography of northern India. So when you read that, you almost feel like you're just taking a train across the northern plains up to the Himalayas. And there's another kavyam called Kumara Sambhavam, again by Kalidasa, which describes what is parts of Kashmir and the grandeur of Himalayas. And you can just revel in the beauty of all that description. You get to know about uh, the flora and fauna of India and Sri Lanka through Valmiki Ramayana. Not many people just think it's a religious text, but there's so much secular definitions and descriptions of the way people were over there. There's even a paragraph denoted to jewelry. It was quite funny that when we were learning Sundarakandam in last year, there was this whole paragraph dedicated to describing Sita's jewels. And it was some of those jewels we don't really wear now, but it was very interesting to see the descriptions of all of those. So poetry, literature is also something that you gain when you learn the language. Especially true with Sanskrit is that it was not just a spoken language, it was the language of academia and scholarship for many, many years, almost 2,500 years. It was like Latin, it held a place Latin held in Europe, where people spoke different tongues, but if something had to be an authority and something had to be respected among the academic circles, it had to be in Latin. It was the same in India. The language of scholarship was Sanskrit. Now it's English. All of us speak English, all of us study in English. If you want to get something published, there's no use getting it published in Hindi, Marathi, or Tamil. It reaches such few audience. If you want to be accepted among the intellectuals, you have to know English. So it was the same with Sanskrit at that point. So you have this language that spanned 2,500 years of history of India, where all the brightest minds of the country wrote their works and produced works in this language. And can you imagine 2,500 years worth of work of some of the brightest people in our country that today we do not have access to because we simply don't know the language that it was written in. We have no idea what's in there, and it all lies unexamined. When we lose a language, we don't just lose what we speak. We lose everything that the language itself spoke. And we actually had to, and it took patenting of turmeric in US to wake us out of slumber to start codifying all our traditional biomedical knowledge. It's just one example. In January this year, Manjul Bhargava had given a lecture in Sanskrit College. Everyone knows who Manjul Bhargava is. He's a professor of mathematics at Princeton, and he's a Fields Medal awardee for 2014. So he had come to Sanskrit College, and he was talking about how there are some very unique concepts that our classical Indian mathematicians had come up with, which can add real value to today's development of mathematics. And there was real need and value to doing research in both and reconciling this. And he said some of this is happening, but not here. It's happening in Holland. He said, you see, we are the custodians of this knowledge and we have all the material, but we are just losing it to other countries. We are losing the plot and we are losing the narrative. So he actually urged people here to start taking up people with studying pure maths or in mathematics to actually take this up and do something about it. And it's not just maths or medicine. It hits quite close to home also, even in law. Every student of law, every lawyer studies something called interpretation of statutes. It's a very important part of our education and the practice of law. So what is interpretation, principles of interpretation? Assume you have something written in Income Tax Act which says product A is not taxable. But then you have another act, maybe the Charitable Endowments Act or the Trust Act, which say particular donation is tax deductible. So obviously there are two laws in the country which are saying two different things. So what do you follow? And there are some tiebreaker rules that we learn to understand how to resolve this conflict. And these rules are all based on English principles and English jurisprudence that developed over centuries of judgments in England. And that is called the theory of interpretation of statutes, and the authority on that is Maxwell. So in the Indian scenario, in some of the cases, our courts observed that Maxwell has good principles, but it doesn't really answer all the questions that come up. So in a very interesting case, the Supreme Court actually took help of a very, very, very old treatise in India, which also had principles of interpretation of rules. It's called the Mimamsa Sutras by Jamini. Basically, both were the same. They were just principles of logic, reasoning, and justice that helped resolve the situation of conflict. But we used only the English ones. We never used the Indian indigenously developed ones. So in this case, the Supreme Court actually made use of one of these old principles. And there was a legislation in Gujarat where two subsequent sections spoke two very different things. So section 174 said that this legislation would override and prevail over everything else. And the next section said, oh, by the way, this is an addition and not a derogation of anything. So it was such an obvious conflict. You have something before saying that this is going to override everything else, and the next line saying, oh no, this is actually only an addition or to provide something more and not a derogation of anything. And the Maxwell principles of interpretation could not really solve this problem. There is no equivalent English jurisprudence principle that could solve. So the court took example of a Mimamsa principle called Gauna Pradhana. Gauna means not important and Pradhana means important. Basically, what that rule said was the subordinate idea must be adjusted to give effect to the principal idea. Applying this principle, the court added something to clarify these sections and resolve the conflict. So basically, it said that where there is a conflict between this Gujarat Act and any other legislation, the Gujarat legislation will override. But if there is no conflict, nothing happens. It's all fine. And it took it took the help of this principle to resolve that. And this holds special interest for me because this is something that I would really like to pursue going forward. I still have a few more years of studies left before I could actually come to the level of reading Mimamsa Sutras. But if I do come to that level, this is something that I definitely like to take up and research on because it's so relevant to what I do in my profession. And I hope I could pursue my studies till then. I've been able to manage now with a lot of support from family, and we have a very close knit study group that really collaborates and helps us study in our busy schedule. And we also take the help of technology to help us keep us on our toes while we are working or doing other things. So what we do is we gather on Google Hangouts at least twice a week. We try to do Hangouts at least twice a week to revise what we've studied in the previous week and to solve exercises. In fact, some of our friends, our classmates are in Bombay and UK and US. So we all have to come together with a time that suits all of us, and we get on Hangouts and we study. We have a WhatsApp group where we constantly converse in Sanskrit so that we get a feel and fluency in the language. And we use Slack a lot. So this is what our Slack group looks like. So we have all these channels called Shabdas, Dhatus, or Abhyasam. And there's some constant chatter going on all of this, and because it's so easy to organize, it's always there. It's on the cloud, so we can access it anywhere. Someone likes only using the iPad, someone is comfortable with laptop, someone phone, and this is accessible to everyone. It's very simple to use. In fact, when I'd asked my classmates when I was preparing for the talk as to what is it that they really gained from learning Sanskrit, one of our classmates who's very old, 70 years old, she actually said, I love using Slack. I discovered Slack because of Sanskrit. And she actually went on to recommend this to her grandkids. She said, why don't you use Slack? So we take advantage of all of this technology. But above all, I think the role that our teacher plays, our guru plays, is very important. He is kind of the sutradhar for all of this. We have class only 3 hours a week. So a lot of information is compressed in those 3 hours. It's only on Saturday and Sunday, and it's only 3 hours. So a lot of information is condensed and taught. So what we do is we record those classes, we upload it onto the cloud, and through the week we sit and we listen to it at leisure and make notes. Not just that, because we have so much to remember in Sanskrit, what our sir does is actually records part of it. So if there are important shlokas from, say, Shakuntalam or Swapnavasavadatta, he would recite all of those, we would record it, and it would be uploaded on the drive. And we would listen to it while we are driving or while we're cooking or while we're doing something else. So subconsciously it's registering in our mind. Because we have to memorize all of this, there's no other way. And this really helps us do that while we're doing something else. So with the help of friends and family and technology, this has all been possible and it adds a lot of value to our life. I think it's very important to have a passion or a pursuit apart from your job or your family, something that's just yours and something that you can go to forgetting everything else. That's so important to keep peace of your mind and for your development. And I think if if you really have the passion to do something, you should never let family or studies or office really deter it. With some determination and perseverance, it can all be done. Everything can be managed. I have a full time job. I have a 6-year-old kid, and I have a family of six. I've managed to do all of that, and I managed to do Sanskrit thanks to all of this. So, everyone over here, whatever your passion might be. So, the takeaway from this talk is not that you should learn Sanskrit, but one is you should really invest time in learning a language. It has a lot of benefits. It has social benefits, it has cognitive benefits, uh, and it has some other soft benefits. You actually learn your native tongue more when you learn another language. I can say my Tamil has improved after I started learning Sanskrit because the medium of instruction is Tamil. I never knew what Uyirezhukal, Meyyezhukal, Uyir I started learning Sanskrit. So there are a lot of benefits to learning any language, and there's a lot of benefit to pursuing a passion outside your everyday grunt work. So uh, I hope everybody takes this back and you actually start if you have something planned, you actually get to it and start doing it. So thank you for listening to me for
Well, I mean, we totally understand that the language has benefits, but Sanskrit is really interesting as well. That's my takeaway. I mean, so intrigued by watching Sanskrit and seeing there is so much of knowledge which we can extract from this particular language as well. Okay. This is your last slide.
Yeah, I do speak these 5 languages. I don't speak 11.
I'm interested in who speaks the first one.
Yeah, I know, right?
So we have 5 minutes for Q&A, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions which we can ask Akshaya. There's going to be the same way we have the Slack channel where we still have we are operating on the Slack channel.
Yeah.
Right. We have the Slack channel which we are encouraging all the discussions, plus all the people who would like to push us, make this as a continuous function can volunteer as well. But I'm opening a questions here. So. What can we ask Akshaya here? There's not Arijit here. There was a very interesting thing one of my colleagues is doing also is essentially taking up a language and learning, which was the whole point which Akshaya brought, that there are so many cognitive skills and benefits which you're going to gain out of the language. And this language is constructed by mathematicians. It's called Esperanto, available on an app called Duolingo. So there's definitely, and I think you pointed out at least 7 to 8 benefits of learning a language in the beginning. Anything where Akshaya can put us more light. I'm super interested though in learning about your Slack usage. What is this? What are these channels here? You go back. So this is an organization itself, right? So you have antonyms. You have what is Abhya Saptaram?
Okay. No, Abhyasa Patram is actually our exercise book. So we all solve the questions over there, and if you have any doubt, we post in this channel. So I think Abhyasa Patram is okay. So there'll always be constant conversation. Okay, on page this question is this the
Right.
answer? Why is the answer? Antonyms, of course, we know opposites. Abhyayas are indeclinables. So there are a lot of these indeclinable words that we have to know in order to form proper sentences. And sometimes we forget those, sometimes we remember, so we put everything on the channel so that it's easy for us to access it when we need it. Bhashantaram is actually a list of Tamil words that are same in Tamil and Sanskrit. And I think that the number of words stand at 200 right now. So whenever we come across a word that is same in Tamil and Sanskrit, we put it down here. So Bhashantaram literally means across languages. Conversation words, if we come across some interesting word that we can use in conversation, we immediately note it down. Dhatus are verbs. You will see that here. So the verb has actually been conjugated in the first, and there are some different past tense forms in the second. So we keep noting this in these channels.
This is the legal organization speaking in you, right?
Well, did you set it up for the whole thing?
Yeah, I set it up, but my God, they've all taken it like duck to water. And so our group is, the youngest is 20 years old and the oldest is 72 years old. They all love it. They all love Drive. They all love Hangouts. They all love Slack. And anything.
You're the technology expert there.
So if anything comes on the mail, in fact, they'll say, why don't you just upload it on the Drive? It's actually become that.
So I definitely have tried learning Sanskrit before, but given a chance now, I'm sure I would approach learning that language so differently from when I was a child. How? And I'm sure you also learned Sanskrit before you. No. Do you find that you approach learning Sanskrit differently now that you came in with intention to improve your cognitive abilities? The intention is not just to learn a language. How did that kind of change the way you approached learning the language?
I think there's some merit in what you asked. A lot of people that I've spoken to who've learned Sanskrit in school actually said, oh God, it's so difficult, it's so painful. And in fact, some of our classmates who learned in school didn't really like it when they were in school because they couldn't really appreciate it. That time, the stress was more on scoring marks and doing well in your board exams. But now, when I started learning something, when I was well established in my job and I didn't have anything else to distract me, it was more for the sheer pleasure of learning it. It was more interest that was driving. And there is no tension at the back of your mind as to, oh God, what would the exam questions be? Will I get 98 out of 100? Will I get 110 out of 100? There's no such tension behind your mind. So you go with an open mind, you learn at your pace, which is very important for tricky languages like these. And it's not just Sanskrit, German is also like this. People find it very difficult to learn. But if you persevere, just that initial push, that 0 to 1 is the difficult part. Once you get the hang of it, it's a very, very easy language to learn because all these rules are so clear and so well structured. Once you get the hang of it, you can just make use of it. It's basically like multiplication tables. It's the base of maths. And when you were in first standard, I at least remember really crying and like, I can't remember the 7 table, I can't remember the 8 table. But now it's just like second nature for you. And that's the base for everything that you do. It's somewhat similar to that. And to answer your question, yes, actually starting it now did make a difference. And I can see beyond just the purpose for which I went. It's not just about keeping Alzheimer's at bay now. There's so much I'm deriving from it. There's so much pleasure that you learn, that you derive from actually reading about how you were as a country, say 1,500 years ago. Not Victorian England, not ancient Greece, but this is you. It's very, very interesting. And to also see what other different perspectives it can add. Because we are so different in the world. Each culture has something new to add. So if you are boxed in just one approach, you never get the benefit of perspective from others. It's especially true in my profession, in the example that I took. We are so obsessed with English jurisprudence and Maxwell and Salmon and all of them that we don't even look beyond that. This is all indigenous in knowledge and not just here. I'm sure There's a system of interpretation in French courts or Southeast Asia that's different. It's just, it adds so much to your perspective when you look at these other approaches. So I'm better off learning this now rather than if I had learned it in school, definitely.
Yeah, I think Latin languages are also very ambiguous. Talk about English and the ambiguity with English. Akshay, I think I'm definitely taking this point of language as a cognitive benefit. But you've been on this for 3 years now, right? And the the will for you to pursue for next many more years is because now you're seeing a connection with this in the professional work that you do as well, that you're passionate about. So, as others of us who want to adopt a language, what is it? What happens after the language is learned? If we don't identify something which has a longevity for us, then would the benefits start declining?
No, it wouldn't, because when you learn a new language, it forces your brain to train permanently. You can never unlearn the language that you learn. It will always be there somewhere, and your brain would have made those connections. It's actually the process of learning itself that is more important than what you learn. That is what helps. So it starts off like that. Generally, when you learn any language, it starts off for a particular purpose. But if you really have interest, if you really see it aiding you in any other way, it progresses. For me, it started with grammar, which is very intellectually stimulating, and then it progressed to literature and poetry and prose, which gives you a very good insight into certain aspects of how we are, why we are. But further than that, now what I see is this being just a medium as a gatekeeper for other information that I can use to my benefit in my profession that not necessarily others in my profession would have. It would actually give me an advantage over the others. And to answer your questions, if you leave learning of the language, it does not take away the benefits. It's already there. It's there in your brain permanently. You can only add to it and you would never subtract. So it's a great reason to learn a language.
What is the most interesting text you have encountered after learning this? Something that is not can't be appreciated that much.
Definitely the grammar part, the way it is so simple, so complicated yet so simple. You can employ certain techniques to not only condense words but even condense sentences. For example, if I don't need to say Maha Ishvara, I can just say Maheshwara. I'll do a sandhi, I'll combine these two pronunciations and combine it into a word. Not just that. If I want to say soft as a flower, I do not need to say Kusumam Niva Komanam. I can just say Kusuma Komanam. That's because of compounding, or what is called as samasa. Or I don't need to say the one who has a face that resembles the face of an elephant. This has just one word in Sanskrit, that is Gajanana, which is Gajasya Ananam Viva Ananam Yasya Sa. So this is a very unique feature of this language, and it's also reflected somewhat in German, not to this level definitely. This is much more advanced. So this is one unique feature in grammar. There was a very interesting story that we read last year called Kadambari. I don't know if anyone has read translations of it. It's a novel, it's the first novel in the world, apparently. And it's long, it's beautiful, it's very descriptive. And what you notice immediately is how we've lost the ability to appreciate the finer aspects of things. So in that book, there would be something called Chandala Kanyaka Varnanam, and that would go on to 2 pages, which is just describing one person, describing her from head to toe, describing her clothes, describing her ornaments. These are all fine things and finer aspects which I think we kind of have somehow lost along the way. And the story of it itself was so interesting. So it's a story within a story within a story. It was something like Inception. By the time we finished it, we actually had to do a flow chart to plot who is who in which janam. It was really like Inception. These are very interesting things that you pick up when you learn language.
Do you speak and read Hindi as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So how different is this from Hindi? Because I failed Hindi in school. I aced Sanskrit in school. Right? So I couldn't really make out the difference because I was still in school, like you said, right? Probably the approach is different. But for me, it was the same thing. So I just want to know how different you think, because learning Hindi, like growing up speaking Hindi and learning this language now, because the text is the same, right? The script is the same.
Yes.
Almost the same. So.
Only the script is the same, but nothing else is the same. So Hindi is based, dialect or the official version of Hindi is based on Sanskrit, but it is not Sanskrit. The grammatical structure of it is different. It does not have case endings. It does not have Rama. It does not have that. It has ne, se, ko. Those are all different words, so you don't need to actually decline the word. And of course, it's also heavily influenced by other languages. And somehow now I feel knowing Hindi is actually a disadvantage because the meaning of some words change. It's not the same. And I would say the same even of Tamil. The similarities between Tamil and Sanskrit is astounding. I don't know why there is fight on what is old, what is new, what is original, what is fake. But the truth is that they are so similar. And sometimes we use the wrong form of words. For example, everything we say pramadam. But pramadam in Sanskrit actually means difficulty or bad. In Tamil it means wonderful, good, it's a compliment. But the actual meaning of it, it's a Sanskrit word, the actual meaning of it is pain and difficulties. The word for good is actually pramodam. So now we consciously start using pramodam instead of pramadam. So sometimes knowing a language that resembles it is actually sort of a disadvantage. And in Tamil, we use the dvitiya vibhakti form a lot. Everything ends with . So when you have to identify the gender of the same word in Sanskrit, for example, patham, it's actually pathaha, but in Tamil we'll say padam. Many words like these, which in Tamil might represent the second case, but in Sanskrit it actually is the first case in a different gender. So it's somewhat disadvantageous. And it's not the same at all. The grammar is not the same, the vocabulary is not the same. It resembles. And the funny part is classical Sanskrit, as we know now, itself is different from old Sanskrit. So there's a misconception that learning Sanskrit means learning scriptures. It's not that. The religious portion of Sanskrit is just 5% or less. Rest all is secular texts, art, literature, dramaturgy, maths, astronomy. And the scriptural part of Sanskrit is actually not Sanskrit. It's a very archaic language that Sanskrit resembles, but it's not Sanskrit. It's something like Hindi and Sanskrit now. It's classical Sanskrit and religious Sanskrit. And that's again something that I learned only after I started going to college and learning the language.
You should continue writing about Sanskrit. Your journey. Alright. Hey, thank you so much for coming.